let's take a look at rapport. Rapport is perhaps the master skill of all success. And this is because it removes the barrier of what holds many trainers and fitness professionals back from achieving their goals. The ability to easily and effectively connect with people will probably do more for your career than perhaps any other skill you can develop. And by the way, it is a skill. Rapport is essential to connect. Only by connecting is someone going to feel comfortable enough with you to let you know where in their life it really hurts or what they need to do to make their life better. And only by making other people's lives better can you grow as a person and especially as a fitness professional. If you've ever had the experience of feeling that the door between effective communication between you and another person was locked, well then rapport is actually the key that unlocks that door. Rapport is defined by Joseph O'Connor and Ian McDermott as a relationship of positive responsiveness between ourselves and another person as well. There are numerous techniques that have been researched and utilized to enhance rapport, things including matching and mirroring, pacing and leading, personality typing, and many others. And by the way, they're all very helpful, and we're going to share a few of them with you in this program. But one possible obstacle that can arise with any technique is that it can preoccupy you. See, what happens is you start directing all of your attention to the prospective client's body language, their facial expressions, you try to read their tonality, all of which does help you to effectively communicate with them. However, these tools should be subservient to and not distract us from what's absolutely most important. The most important part of the rapport process is to create enough trust between you and a prospect, between you and a member, to allow them to open up and thereby facilitate honest communication. This way, the two of you can identify together how you can make their life better. Here's how it works. Rapport leads to trust. Trust leads to honest communication. Honest communication helps you to identify what people really want. Now, communication leads to better assessment of someone's goals, needs, abilities, and most importantly, what they want. And that means you're now able to create greater individualization of benefits. The greater the individualization of benefits that you offer, the higher the level of perceived value in the mind of the client. The higher the value, the greater the probability that that person is at some point going to become your client. The key to all of this is commonality. If I share something with you, then in some way, me and you are now similar. We're connected. So if we share similarities, I feel comfortable enough with you that I can relax. From there, the possibility for trust to start to develop in our relationship begins to emerge. Great communicators are constantly seeking a bridge between themselves and another person. When they find it, they cross that bridge, and therefore, they're able to meet people where they are. This requires sincere interest in the member. Never try to impress the member with what you know. Dale Carnegie, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, advised that we'll be far more effective by being impressed with someone than we will by trying to be impressive. If you want to find an area of commonality, look for things like where a person went to school. Maybe the two of you grew up in the same city. Maybe you knew the same people. Maybe the two of you play the same sport, or maybe you read the same books. You get what I'm saying. But what do you do when there's no really apparent point of commonality? What if your member's an animal rights activist and you come from a long line of furriers? Well, sharing that with them might not build rapport. Luckily, there's more that helps us connect beyond our background and beyond our interests. We perceive the world through our five senses: what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell, and what we taste. The three most dominant senses that we use most often in communication are auditory, what we hear, visual, what we see, and kinesthetic, what we feel. How we use these three senses determines how we communicate and therefore what we perceive. Now, each person communicates a little bit differently based on the order and primacy of the senses that they use. For example, if you pulled over to ask for directions because you were lost, would it be easier for the person to draw you a map and help you identify landmarks, or would you rather that they write out the directions in bullet points? If you're a visually dominant person, the map would obviously work best. But if you're an auditory dominant individual, the map might be frustrating where the bullet points might be far more effective. This way you can vocalize in your head, maybe out loud, each step in the route as if someone were beside you giving you verbal directions. Everyone uses all three senses in communication all the time. However, we have preferred communication pathways that we tend to utilize predominantly. When our communication pathway is different from the person that we're communicating with, it decreases the ease, the enjoyment, and the efficiency of the communication process. Conversely, our perception is affected by how we use our senses. What we visualize internally or focus on in our environment, how we use our body, how we hold our posture, and all the things that we say to ourselves affect our unique perception. When our communication style matches the person that we're speaking to, we share the experience or we share the state that they're in at the moment. The conversation seems to be in flow. Notice next time that you're out in a restaurant or a public place, two people that are involved in an intense, seemingly enjoyable conversation. Or think about two people in a restaurant who are obviously in love. How do you know? Well, their body language, the intensity, the gestures that they make, and things such as that will most likely be very similar to each other. As a matter of fact, a lot of couples that are really in rapport, all of their communication cues are exactly identical. See, we're not suggesting that you mirror the other person's movements exactly. So if they place their hand on the table, don't immediately place your hand on the table. This can be very noticeable, and as a matter of fact, this can be interpreted as artificial. What we do suggest is that you simply pay close attention to how that person's communicating and then adapt your communication style to the one that they prefer. This is very considerate and requires you to pay complete attention to the other person far more than paying attention to what's going on inside your own head. Adapt your communication style in the following aspects. Rate of speech. People process information similar to that which they speak. Their comfort and comprehension will be enhanced when your rate, inflection, and intensity of speech is similar to their own. Body language. By adapting a similar physiology, you're sending the same sensory messages to your brain that they're sending to theirs. This also assists you in sharing their experience. In addition, you physically represent someone who's similar to them. This commonality may help them feel that the two of you are alike, and if the two of you are alike, you're able to understand them. Choice of words. We select words based on our internal representational patterns. This means that a visual person may illustrate their goals in terms of how they want to look or how they want to see themselves after achieving their goals. A kinesthetic person, when discussing their fitness goals, well, she might focus more on how she wants to feel more so than how she wants to look. Listen carefully for the words and descriptions that each individual predominantly uses. Communicate with them in the same way that they're communicating with themselves. For example, if they express consistently how they want to feel, avoid focusing exclusively on aesthetic changes. If they use certain words like tone or firm, use the same words when expressing the benefits of your program. Even if their description lacks a degree of scientific plausibility, like spot reduction. See, in this situation, it's more important to be effective than it is to be right. Education is a process based on the readiness of the learner. The more you can make an individual feel understood and validated internally, the more receptive they're going to be to learning from you in the future. By adapting your communication style to that of another person, it makes it easier for them to relate to you. It makes them feel like they're being listened to, and it's motivating for them because the communication is centered on what's principally most important to them, not to you. Let's take a brief look at some of the common characteristics of each communication style. People who are more visual speak rapidly. They have a greater or more frequent use of voice inflections. They tend to look up, either to the left or to the right or straight ahead when they're trying to access and process information. They're far more influenced by what they see than what they hear and how they feel. They frequently use body gestures. Someone who is auditory dominant speaks rhythmically, rarely uses any voice inflections at all. When accessing or processing information, they tend to look side to side to access their temporal lobes. That's where we process auditory information. As a consequence, this individual is most influenced by what they hear, how things sound to them. Does that sound right to you? And they moderately use body gestures. Someone who's kinesthetic, they speak slowly, and they pause frequently, because it takes longer for this individual to internalize how they feel about the information that they're receiving from you, how they feel about what they want to say to you. This person tends to look down to the right, very frequently when they're processing information. They're influenced by feelings, and they move a little bit slower, and they have much more infrequent use of body language and body gestures. Visual. This person, again, let's cover this, speaks rapidly, frequent use of gestures and voice inflections, looks up, to the left, to the right, or straight ahead during the conversation. And they use visual words in their sentences, like, can you see what I'm saying? It's clear to me that, and so on and so forth. Auditory uses body gestures less frequently. When accessing information, remember, look side to side. They speak rhythmically and uses voice inflections rarely, and when they're communicating with you, they use auditory-based sentences. Like, does that sound right to you? You hear me? Kinesthetic people speak slowly. They pause frequently, and they tend to use filler words like as they internalize and process. They have very few body gestures, and they're not very physically animated types of people. They relate best to how they feel about what they're saying or what's being said. They tend to use sentences like, well, I feel that. Can you grasp what I'm saying? Okay. Again, it's important to pay attention and always adapt your communication style to that of your client, to that of your member, in order to facilitate effective communication, and in doing so, making them feel as comfortable as possible. So let's take a look at some tools that will help us improve rapport. Dr. David Keirsey observed that throughout human history, philosophers, theologians, psychologists, and writers across the span of thousands of years in multiple cultures observed 4 specific temperaments in which most people seem to fit. His observations go back as far as 400 BC to the classifications that Hippocrates used to classify and describe temperament. Keirsey classified them into guardians, artisans, rationals, and idealists. This is similar to Myers-Briggs. Now, each type has 4 subtypes, equaling 16 personality types in all. Some of the most influential researchers on the subject of personality type, people such as Carl Jung, Isabel Myers, Catherine Briggs, Kretschmer, and Spenger, all seem to agree that while there are many personality types, they can generally be classified into 4 basic personality types, or 4 basic temperaments. Many authors have done a great job in simplifying and teaching these types through various analogies. And Dr. Keirsey, in his book, Please Understand Me, masterfully uses the analogy of the Wizard of Oz to explain the innate differences that make us unique and therefore inherently valuable to one another. He writes, once upon a time, in the land of Oz, 4 individuals set out on a strange and dangerous journey. Each of them were lacking something vital to his or her nature, and each wanted to find the great wizard and ask him for his help. The lion was lacking courage. Although a powerful, magnificent beast, he had grown cowardly and lost his self-respect, and he wanted the wizard to give him back his nerve. As long as I know myself to be a coward, I should be unhappy, he said. Dorothy was afraid that she'd lost her way home. Toto, she said to her little dog, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Though never really lost at all, Dorothy felt stranded and alone, and she wanted Oz to return her to her security of her aunt and uncle's farm. There's no place like home, she said. Tin Woodman believed that he had no heart. As tender and sensitive as he was, he felt stiffened with rust and unable to love. He wanted Oz to help him feel a warm, loving heart beating in his chest. No one can love who has no heart, he said. Scarecrow thought he had no brain. Although the most ingenious of the 4, he considered himself witless and worthless. He wanted Oz to make him smart. Brains are the only thing worth having in this world, he said. Arm in arm, these 4 very different characters set off to the Emerald City to seek the wizard's help. Courage, home, heart, and brain personify not only the characters of the Wizard of Oz, but the characteristics of all of us. We're going to break down our 4 primary personality types into director, amiable, analytical, and expressive. Before we explore these 4 types, it's important that we realize that everyone has traits of each type, yet each of us, just like sensory representational patterns, have certain predispositions or preferences that makes us lean towards one a bit more than the others. You're not trying to classify anyone. You're just trying to pay attention to the attributes and the characteristics that each person demonstrates in order to more effectively communicate from their perspective. When you're communicating with a member, pay attention to the subtle aspects of their personality and their temperaments, and simply adjust your communication style to match theirs. This is known as matching and mirroring, and it's one of the keys to developing rapport because it demonstrates similarity. Opposites may attract, but when you first meet a member, the more you differ from that person, the less connection the two of you are going to have. If you're different than them, they won't believe that you thoroughly understand them. And if you don't thoroughly understand them, you can't really help them get what they want. And that makes them apprehensive and uncomfortable in entrusting themselves completely to you. And if they can't do that, you really don't have a lot of value to them. The better you are at understanding and mirroring someone's communication style, the more successful you're probably going to be. So let's take a look at the director. The director is very, direct, which is how he got that reputation, and self-contained. This person is driven to win and to achieve. They're someone who is known for getting results. They fear being viewed as soft. Their attributes are, again, they're very driven. They're achievement-oriented, and they have a high self-expectancy, and pay attention to this, a high expectancy of other people. Their liabilities are that sometimes they might seem inflexible, impatient, intolerant, and sometimes lack sensitivity, and they could be abrupt. And they do have a tendency to alienate others who tend to have a different style. So again, some of the behaviors of the director are this person is going to be very bottom line oriented. They're going to become noticeably impatient if they think you're not getting to the point, or if you're giving them all the details and all the research and all the data behind your scientific rationale that went into your program. They seem very self-assured, they're going to seem confident, straightforward, and at times they may even seem abrupt. It's not that they're being rude, they're just very achievement-oriented, and they have very little patience for anything that gets in the way of the achievement of their goal. They tend to make steady eye contact. Usually, even though they're in gym attire, they tend to be well-dressed. They're very high energy, and they seem to always be moving with a sense of urgency at a fast pace. Even movements that are inconsequential seem to be decisive and deliberate. Now, their posture is usually upright, and when communicating, they're usually leaning in toward you. And again, task orientation is key with these people. So here's some do's and don'ts. When communicating with this type of person, be very straightforward. Be clear and concise in what you're saying, and stay focused on their goals. Don't talk about yourself. Appear to be efficient and well prepared, demonstrate competency, and never say anything without first being able to back it up. Here's a couple of things you don't want to do. Don't stray from business. Don't give the appearance that you're indecisive or you're vacillating or in any way that you lack confidence. Don't appear anxious or flustered, and don't leave any of their concerns unaddressed or give ambiguous answers to direct questions. Let's take a look at the analytical. The analytical is someone who is self-contained, reserved, and introverted. Their greatest fear is irrationality. Their attributes are, these people are great problem solvers. They're systematic, they're logical, they're analytical, they're organized, they have an affinity for structure, they follow through. Their liabilities are, they tend to be a perfectionist some of the time. They tend to spend their time getting ready to get ready. They're inflexible, and sometimes they lack spontaneity. These people are detail-oriented. They make up the small percentage of your members who want to know the reasons behind your recommendation. They want to know the scientific rationale behind your program. What research supports it? Can you present correlating data along with empirical evidence to support your training strategy? Then they want references from at least 2 people from their hometown of Hayden, Idaho, who can attest to your effectiveness as a trainer. I'm being facetious, but only to a degree. The bottom line is that these individuals are, for the most part, logical, highly competent, and methodical people. They pride themselves on being rational, reliable, and trustworthy. They, like the director, are not really open to small talk, especially in the beginning of the relationship. But unlike the more extroverted director, Analytical people, well, they're more introverted. To understand them, you need to draw them out through skillfully directed questions. Here's a couple of do's and don'ts. Do be prepared. Do prepare a detailed, methodical presentation. Give supporting data and research if they ask for it. Be accurate and not overly ambitious in the goals that you set for them. Don't show up unorganized. Don't appear to be frivolous. Do not communicate on a personal level. Stick to just the facts, ma'am. Don't appear to be unorganized, and don't appear to lack expertise, and most damaging, do not appear to be relaxed regarding attention to detail. So let's take a look at the amiable person. The amiable person is someone who dislikes conflict and they avoid aggressive behavior. This person is most afraid of change. Their attributes are they're earnest. They really are very warm, they seem friendly, they're methodical, they're thorough, they're a good listener, and they're very relationship oriented. Their liabilities are timidity. Sometimes they have a tendency to lack assertiveness. They vacillate in decisions back and forth. They greatly fear change, and they have an extreme external frame of reference. In other words, other people's opinions, beliefs, suggestions hold a lot of weight with this type of person. These people are absolutely the least assertive of the four, but they're also the most accommodating. They tend to do things more to please you and to please other people than they do to please themselves. These are the type of people that you'll ask, well, Mrs. Jones, does 8 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday work for you? And she'll say, well, I don't know. Does it work for you? I really don't want to be inconvenient to you. Are you sure you don't have other people that you need to train at that time? And so forth. They're sweet, but you need to get an affirmative answer for them, or else it's going to be hard to help them really get the results that they want. In addition to that, they might even drive you crazy. They need help setting goals and making decisions for themselves. These people are not very direct, so you have to follow up with them often to determine how they're feeling about their membership or their training program. They're not likely to speak up when they're dissatisfied because they feel very uncomfortable with conflict. This person, unlike the director and the analytical types, are probably receptive to discussing points of commonality, such as mutual hobbies, where you grew up, what your favorite movies are, and anything else that would connect the two of you and strengthen the relationship. If you get right down to business with this person, you're going to seem cold and abrasive. Whereas with the director and analytical types, if you didn't get right down to business, you'd seem unprofessional. And at the worst, you'd even seem incompetent to them. So here's some do's and don'ts with the amiable. With amiable people, do gradually progress into a presentation with an icebreaker, if you will, or a point of commonality before proceeding. Present yourself as someone who's easygoing and soft-spoken. Use testimonials. Who, like them, might have had apprehension, but had similar goals, similar situation, trained with you or used the club, and had a very positive outcome as a result. Use their strong external frame of reference in their favor. If possible, talk about how the results that they're going to receive is going to benefit other people around them who are very important to them. Don't be overbearing. Don't get aggressive with these people. Don't have an urgent, all-business disposition, and don't put pressure on them. Let's take a look at the expressive. The expressive person is the most open. They're the most extroverted and the most direct of all the personality types. This person needs constant stimulation. They have a strong dislike for routine, and their greatest fear is the fear of rejection. Their attributes are they're jovial, they're playful, they're fun to be around. This person is the life of the party. They're very intuitive, expressive, and persuasive. Their liabilities, and sometimes this is very challenging when you meet them appointment after appointment, they have erratic focus, and sometimes they seem to lack awareness of the boundaries of other people. This person, like I said before, is the life of the party. They're going to be extremely engaging and personable, fun-loving, but they're distracted so easily, and they need you to bring their focus back very often. They might as well be put off by an all-business attitude. You know, sometimes they need a little bit of small talk. They need to connect with you to know they like you, you get on well, before they can trust you. But this person also needs to be held accountable to the things that they need to do, or else there's a high likelihood it's probably not going to get done. They require constant stimulation, constant feedback, constant praise, and they're more motivated to have fun than any of the other personality types, meaning they're most likely to lose interest in the program if the fun factor isn't there. These people are not detail-oriented. They're not bottom-line task-oriented people. Super important for these people to enjoy what they're doing. The more details you give them, the more turned off they're going to become. So here's some do's and don'ts. Do be friendly and engaging. Do provide testimonials. They're also affected by other people's opinions. Use stories, metaphors, analogies, rather than hitting them with fact after fact. Don't appear to be detached. Do not dominate the conversation. And don't discuss details, theories, or research in any degree of depth. Remember, just as with our sensory modalities, everyone's a combination of all these types, but again, can't repeat this too many times, we all have dominant traits and preferred sensory pathways and personality types that make us very unique. The information on personality types, it goes so much more into detail than this certification really gets into. We just want you to have some basic information so you can pick up some clues on how to best interact with someone in order to develop comfort on their part and rapport. Even though you're not really sure sometimes what type the other person is, that's okay. The most important thing to focus on in building rapport is focus on the other person. The key here is not to see how many details about personality types or sensory representational pathways you can remember. The key is to be fascinated enough with the other person to pay attention to the cues that they give you as you communicate with them. Most people are focused on themselves more than the other person during a conversation. Try to learn as much as you can about someone, not only by what they tell you, but by what they don't tell you. The greatest portion of what we communicate, if you remember from before, is nonverbal. How do they prefer to communicate? Who are they as a person? Adapt your style to theirs. See, if you can adapt your style to another person's, you can build rapport with almost anyone. You just need to know how to connect. You need to know how to get some cues on how to connect with someone. Here's some things that you need to pay attention to. What's their appearance? What's their level of personal accessories they have on their body? What's their level of physical movement, energy level, posture? How much physical distance do they put between you and them? What's the degree of touch they use? Are they someone who, when they tell you something, they put their hand on your arm to get your attention? Do they make a lot of eye contact? What are the key words and phrases they use? See, often, when you can observe carefully, it'll be pretty easy for you to match and mirror the characteristics of the other person. Start with just one thing. It could be their posture. Once you have that, perhaps you can match the level of eye contact with theirs. From there, try to use the same words and phrases. For example, if they use the word tone in the conversation, use it in the conversation discussing their program design strategy as well. That's a point of connection. Key is start small and work from there. Is every hair in place? Is this person meticulous? Are they a little bit more laid back? Is their hair undone a bit? See, visual people a lot of times are far more concerned with and attuned to the aesthetic details of their appearance. I'm sure you know someone who gets dressed up or all done up even to, go throw out the garbage. Well, they're leaning more towards that type of person. If somebody comes into the gym with a BlackBerry or a pocket PC, this gives you a couple of clues. This could be a director who's a mover and shaker type, trying to achieve as much as they can within a time frame. They're always on their phone. I'm sure you've had clients like this. They're always checking email and they're always trying to schedule and multitask appointments, or they could simply be an analytical type that has a strong affinity for personal organization tools. So this way they can be organized and structured at all times. Are they physically animated? Do they gesture frequently with their hands and body when they speak? If they do you gesture frequently? Do you raise your level of energy with this person to match theirs? Or do you kind of stick with what's comfortable for you, sending the message, we're not alike and therefore, unfortunately, we don't connect? If they're more reserved, do you make them uncomfortable because you've been conditioned to be more high energy and you're more physically animated when you're speaking? See, the key is to mirror what they do, not to the point of mocking them, but enough so that the styles are somewhat the same. Is it a high energy person? Do they speak rapidly, slowly? It's really important to match your rate, your tempo, your voice inflections, and pitch to theirs. So if somebody says, well, I'm really excited to get going in my program, don't say, well, I'm glad you're really excited getting going in your program. The first thing we're going to do, pick it up a bit. In the same sense, if they're like, well, I'm really looking forward to the program, don't be like, wow, okay, let's go. You'll freak them out. People, again, process information at a rate that's similar to that which they speak. Visual people process images, so they speak faster. Kinesthetic people internalize feelings, which means they speak slower. Auditory people, they're somewhere in the middle. If you fail to match the rate of speech of the person you're talking to, they're going to have trouble staying in pace with you. It's going to be hard to understand you, and in the worst case, you're going to be an exhausting individual to have a conversation with. Posture. Are they upright, relaxed? Again, if they're upright, assume that posture, or they're going to assume that you're lax and you're not serious enough about the appointment. Whereas if a person's leaning back and they're more relaxed and you're up front and all serious, they're going to think you seriously need to loosen up if the two of you are going to be able to work together. Are they associated or disassociated? Meaning, when they speak to you, do they lean in? If they lean in, you lean in too. Try that next time you're talking to someone and they lean in and you lean in as well, you instantly feel more connected. But if they don't lean in towards you, don't lean in towards them. Imagine you leaning in and someone's leaning back and leaning back. Not a good place to be. How much space does this person put between you and them? Physical distance is key. See, personal space depends on cultural norms, the environment, how well you know someone, whether you're talking to the opposite sex, the same sex. All of these things are very important factors. But just like everything else we've discussed so far, the key here is to pay attention. If you're speaking to someone and they step back from you, don't step forward until you've backed them into a corner. That's obviously going to make them feel uncomfortable. If someone uses touch, for example, you're speaking to them and they reach out and touch your arm, that might be an indicator that they're kinesthetic in nature. Now, this clue might help you determine the rate of speech, the phrases to use, and even further, it might help you determine her learning style during her workout. So instead of just showing her what to do, you might actually have to have her perform the exercise or help cue her to move her body in space because she learns kinesthetically. But here's the rule. Never touch a member or a client except for kinesthetic cueing pertaining specifically to exercise instruction. And even then, explain how, explain where, and explain why you need to touch them, and make sure that they verbally tell you it's okay. Silence is not acceptance. If somebody makes consistent eye contact with you, make consistent eye contact with them. Conversely, someone who's not comfortable with a lot of eye contact is going to feel uncomfortable if you're staring at them like you're trying to burn a hole in the middle of their forehead. See, a lot of times we're told if you don't make consistent eye contact with someone, they'll perceive you as being shady or someone who's not trustworthy. That's not substantiated scientifically at all. The key is if somebody prefers a lot of eye contact, maintain eye contact. But if you're speaking to someone who, let's say, is auditory in nature, remember, they have to move their eyes away from you, access their temporal lobes to think about what they're saying and how it sounds, and then they come back. They're not going to feel as comfortable if you're just staring at them. So keep the degree of eye contact with another person that reflects their comfort level. Words and phrases. The words that we use evoke specific thoughts, visual imagery, association, and feelings. I used to have a friend of mine in New York City who adored her Shar-Pei. Her dog was her best friend. She took the dog with her everywhere. And I have another friend who lived in another part of New York who had a little boy who not so long ago was bitten by the family dog and hurt badly. Although, not to worry, he completely recovered. Now, if you would just say the word dog around my friend from New York City, instantly you could see her face light up. She has positive emotions, associations, and images that just fire off in her head. Now, if you said the word dog in front of my friend's son, his physiology also changes, but for the worse. It brings back feelings of him of fear instantly. See, even though he consciously knows there's no physical threat, it still affects him as if it just happened. So if somebody cuts out a picture of a Calvin Klein underwear model and hangs it up on his freezer and says to himself every time he walks by that picture, I'm going to have toned abs like that guy. and says it over and over, week after week, day after day, and he gets motivated every time he sees the picture and says, I'm going to have toned abs like that guy. When he comes into the club and he says, well, I want to tone my abs, don't sit there and explain to him, well, you can't spot reduce, or worse, invalidate him by saying, so what you mean, Bill, is that you want to maintain lean muscle mass and simultaneously reduce body fat. No, he said he wants toned abs. Whether he's right or wrong, how much scientific validation he has behind them, it's all irrelevant. Being right as a trainer is not nearly as important as being effective. Use the words and phrases that other people use, and you'll connect with them effectively and rapidly. No matter how skilled of a communicator you are, everyone's had the experience of, for whatever reason, just not being able to connect. Now, the difference is that most people who are paying attention to the other person, they know they're not connecting. Whereas the natural tendency we have is we're just talking and talking and talking, so even though we're not connecting, we don't do anything different. So the other person just winds up getting frustrated and not wanting to communicate with us anymore. Master communicators are different. They notice that they're not connected, and they keep adjusting until they find that emotional bridge between them and the other person. Another common mistake that trainers make a lot with their clients is somehow in the conversation, things are going well, but you make a mistake and you do something to break rapport. But then you don't get back to communicating on the level that built rapport in the first place. You can avoid this by focusing on three things. One, like we've said many times before, know the purpose of the conversation. What are you trying to accomplish collectively as a partnership between you and the member? Search for common ground and look to observe cues represented in how the other person's communicating, and then simply adapt. See, people assume that they know why they're communicating, but they don't take time to clearly direct their intention.